things that they need for worldwide, firm-wide governance and management.
And for folks that are hearing these technical terms and not getting it, I'm not saying dumb it down, because most of our audience knows more than we do, but for those that don't understand, they're openly announcing a new global bank of the world to fix the banking system when they created the fiat mess to begin with, and they're going to have global taxes, global regulations, global control, set the currency, set the interest rates, and they're openly announcing this. Please continue.
Yeah, they are. And, of course, for people who don't know what the Bank of International Settlements is, it's the Federal Reserve and all the central banks' bank. This is the place where they go. And the reason we call it the Basel Accords is it's all coming out of Basel, Switzerland. And Basel II was implemented in steps. It actually goes back to 1999. It was accepted by our Federal Reserve and everybody else in 2005, and it dictates how they will operate. And the fascinating thing is many of the things that are most shocking coming out of Obama's mouth aren't coming from him. They're coming from Switzerland, and they're coming from, again, what's not international but supranational.
Yeah, that's right, folks. This isn't all the countries working together. This is a global corporate web over the earth telling all the countries what to do. It's not the countries together deciding what's going to be done. It's this web telling all of us what to do. So none of the direction or will of the people is being manifested in that for all the liberals that say, oh, and it's the next phase, like Star Trek, one big world. I don't have that document in front of me because it's back there in my office and from the International Bank of Settlements. Do you have that? I know it's up at Rollye.net. For those that don't know, I mean, they say right there in their own technical language that they're going to be imploding things 2008, 2009 to bring in the next phase. There is the proof in yet another document where they're engineering this.
Yeah, I'm looking for that because I've got probably 100 pages of this. But what you were really talking about is the fact that what Basel II did, and they have it right in their documents, is that they allowed banks to dictate their own capital requirements. And they set this up, and what they pretty much had said was that everything would hit the fan by 2009 when this was implemented. And but that's just the tip of the iceberg, Alex. I need to send you more documents, to say the least, because again, what we're looking at here is at first the capital requirements, which is what we talked about on the air the other night. But Pillar 2 is the supervisory oversight, and this is where we're going to see them call the shots for how our private CEOs are compensated. And then when you get to Pillar 3, if Pillar 2 is the law enforcer, Pillar 3 will be the handcuffs. That's when they've got the total control.
And then they've already, in 2000, had a global summit in Australia with the UN where most of the nations on the planet, all the big Western ones, signed on for global standardization for World ID. And that's really what was adopted years later in the Real ID in the U.S., and England and Australia and everywhere else. We already have a global standardized system being forced in. So right when we hear there's really a national ID card, no, it's really a world ID grid. And the way they announce it is, oh, you get thumbprinted when you go to England or Germany now, and foreigners get thumbprinted here too with a digital biometric. It's all the same.
Oh, sure it is. And, you know, people who think that, well, I'm aware of that, I'm aware of the IMF. Well, the IMF is secondary to Basel, to say the least. And so just like when you talk about the Council of Foreign Relations, 3,000 members, yeah, well, 2,990 don't know exactly what's going on. And it's the same thing here. But the interesting thing, and you probably heard this on the news too, is that now Bernanke says they're going to release our stress tests on our banks. And, of course, stress tests come right out of the IMF, which, of course, is dictated by the BIS, the Bank of International
Settlements. Yeah, that means
Settlements.
your country is under receivership when this is happening. They set it up, they give you the money, they set up the Ponzi scheme, and then they come in and say what you must do with your industries, your roads, you must hand this to that corporation to that. This is literally the looting now.
Right, right. And when we talk about, as you were mentioning, carbon taxes or energy taxes, consumption taxes, these are right out of IMF documents, and of course that comes, you go back further and you say, oh, it comes right out of Basel. So it's a couple-step situation, but the thing that you were alluding to earlier, this IMF document, because every couple of years they have these consultations. Well, in 2006, the Article 4 consultation on page 13, and this again is 2006.
Yeah, say that slowly because I'm going to have my guys do a story on this. I mean, there's so many of these. I've seen many others similar, but here's just another one where you see all the premeditation, And right at this time, we're at Bilderberg, where they've made the decision. We get the intel from the actual heads of all the major pyramid structures, which again are compartmentalized, but they all nexus in to meet and to iron things out at many meetings like Bilderberg. They were already planning it then. We came out and announced what was going to happen. It did happen. But yeah, this is very important. Give folks where they can get this.
Okay, it's IMF United States 2006 Article 4 consultation staff report, page 13. And again, the IMF in this report, they're not creating this. They're reporting on what is in the Basel II documents. And you can read the entire Basel II Accord. It's 284 pages, but you can read it. The original ideation, 1999, and it was approved, as I say, in November of 2005 by the member banks. And, of course, the member banks includes the Federal Reserve. So here's the IMF.
Or I could just laugh at you that's done research and say world banks don't exist and giggle, and then I could go watch the Cowboys and listen to Britney Spears.
Well, exactly. And you see, that's the way they'll do it. When we talk about one world currency, they can still call it the dollar or the yen or the euro. They can still have whatever.
That's right. At the international level, though, it's standardized. They control it. Read over that for folks.
Well, exactly. So we're, again, talking, here's the IMF in 2006, and they're referring back to what Basel is doing. And what they're saying, Basel II, bank regulators expected some decline in minimum capital requirements after the shift to Basel II norms in 2009. They acknowledge that the impact on bank balance sheets is uncertain, in part because the role of the economic cycle would only become fully evident after the system was implemented. However, capital
Let's stop. See, they're changing capital requirements, and then leading up to 2009, they have to then gauge how bad this hurts us as they consolidate. It's all written in lawyer speak, and that they would know in 2009, and now they do know, gauging their attack profile, their computer models. Now they're fine-tuning with these G20 meetings. Please continue.
Right, and they're saying capital adequacy standards could be recalibrated if necessary, as the transition to the new framework will take place over several years. And so what they're really saying, again, is what we're saying about incrementalism. Well, we know in 2009 it's going to hit the fan, therefore we'll need to recalibrate it. And, you know, when you look at it and you say, this is 2006, yeah, but when you look at where they got it, this started in 99.
Amazing. And so they're 10, 12 years ahead of this over and over and over again. 10 years from this date, but 12 years out from completion. And people will say, where's the world government? When they're already issuing the new quantitative easing, their new super currency at bank-to-bank level, backed up with our tax money. My God, Rollye, how do we get the general public to understand this and realize this? Because the average good old boy making $200,000 a year, he thinks he's part of the power elite because he goes to a once-a-year luncheon with the governor. And so he psychologically thinks he's with the big boys, and he's going to go right down the tubes the whole time thinking we're his enemy.
Well, a lot of people are smug thinking, well, that's all right. For instance, I'm just in gold. And what they're going to realize is that this control is complete. For instance, we look at gold prices, and all of us were saying gold should have been up past $2,000 an ounce by now, and we know something's going on. Well, something is going on, and that is that gold is being bought much like the mortgage securities were. And this is also by nations as well as financial entities, the Deutsche Bank, for instance. We're looking at not only people buying fractional shares of gold, which everybody knows about, the ETFs, of course, and that's an issue right there in terms of how much ETF versus how much gold COMEX has. But you get beyond the ETF and you start to get into the ETN, and this is a gold derivative. The ETN are exchange-traded notes. They are unsecured debt obligations, and they are in the absolute billions. And, of course, the entities that sell them, they don't want gold to go up. So people who think they have a way out, these are the people that I'd like to awaken first, because they know something's up. They're not completely still asleep, but they think that there's a way around this. There is no way around this but through it. And again, as I mentioned earlier with that statement, which in one way is hopeful in terms of we might have to adjust capital requirements and things of this nature, they want to continue to do it incrementally. Now, in terms of how you wake them up, Alex, you know better than anyone else, because the thing about your films is there is an entertainment component as well. I'm not saying you're doing a soft shoe, but the idea that you're presenting it in an entertaining and compelling manner if I were to read, let alone Basel II, if I were just to read an IMF accord, people would be asleep by the third page if they weren't by the third sentence. So it must be done in a way that it's entertaining and also in a way that it's relatable. So people understand, like we were saying about the Internet, for instance, it's the same exact deal here. Frame it as free market or frame it as a trade agreement.
Exactly. Well, I mean, take the establishment. They do everything that they do. Very boring, very dry. But if you know the lawyer language, it's horrifying to read what they're saying. But they say it to calm you. It's no big deal. It's some dirty, old, gray paper. Don't look at it. Never mind that sports stadium. Never mind that FEMA camp. Never mind this or that. Never mind these bills. Everything's fine. They speak to our laziness. But we're designed to be like humans, where a saber-toothed cat comes running up to us and it's got big fangs and it's growling.
The GCN Radio Network, providing the world with hard-hitting talk radio. GCN, great talk radio starts here.